Well, I thought I'd do a little video on surface prep for the castings and castings, front axles, anything like that that's not panels, just the basic part of the tractor. So you'll see over here, oh well, while we're doing this, we're halfway through and I thought, oh, perhaps I'll show. I do get questions on this, so I thought there was an opportunity there, so I thought I'd have a grab the camera and have a bit of a chat about it. Now, this housing here, if you look at the kingpin over here, I've put the bushes in there, but that is as far as we've gone. So that still has the paint on it. It needs a tidy up. With the paint on it, well, there's a couple of things we need to do. One of them is we need to get all the old paint off, and getting all the old paint off and sanding it down is so once you've painted it or once you've put a primer coat on it, there's no little edges coming up. You know, sometimes the thinners in the primer will curl an edge, and it's a bloody nuisance once you get it all done. So there's a couple of things I do. One of them is with this housing here, an option for this housing would be to put it in a sandblast cabinet. I do have a sandblast cabinet over there with about 60 grit sand in it, and that would clean that up nicely. Probably with the bushes in, I would tape the top and tape the bottom up, so there's no chance of any of the garnet, I should say, none of the garnet sticking in the kingpin bush, the soft brass surface on the kingpin bush. So there is a couple of options and a couple of tools I like to use, so we might have a quick look at that. This next section here, this is halfway through the process. So this axle, my blast cabinet broke down. I sandblasted this axle and it had to sit for a little while, and it got a bit of surface rust on it. And the surface rust, I've been just working away getting it back off. Now, you may be able to see, you've got a nice shiny edge here. We'll talk about how we got that, but you'll see a couple of darker patches there. And the darker patches, there's a little bit of surface rust that's in the metal itself, and it doesn't matter how much you clean it. Like, you can sandblast that and it'll look perfect. If there was a little bit of pitting that it cleaned out, you don't know that you've got it all out all of the time. So with this housing here, I sandblasted it. It had to sit because I didn't have time to finish it at that time. So I'm just tidying it up again. Now, this side here, you can see how it's black. And this is this stuff, I just love it. It's a CRC product. Look, there's no secret, CRC helps me out with the channel, but this is great stuff. It's rust converter. So what happens is with say this housing here, you can see that polished top edge. I polished that with a sander and there appears to be no rust there at all. And I've done it on this side, and you can see when I give that a rub, a little bit of it comes off of my hands, but that shiny front edge, there's no rust there for it to bed into, for it to wick into. Yet these other sections where there's a little bit of pitting and things like that, even though I've done my best to get it as clean as I can, there's still a little bit of rust there. So I use this stuff, I brush it on, and that gives us this black finish. But when you read this for the CRC rust converter, it's a light liquid. I brush it on these parts. I just have a little brush, a little pot, and I just brush it on and walk away. And within 5 minutes it goes purple, then it goes black, and it's neutralised it. But it says you can put this stuff on your housings, your castings, whatever you choose. That would have to be a ferrous metal, I'd imagine. And you can put this stuff on and paint your top coat straight over the top with an enamel. For maximum penetration, work it in. Oh yeah, you can work it in with a brush. I do that a little bit. Overcoat with enamel top coat for best results. If using a water-based coat, put a primer on. So that's what I choose to do. So So the natural progression I set up here to have a chat was, that's a bare housing, that's had no work done to it. This is how it ends up roughly. Then I put the rust converter on to make sure there's no little surprises, and it's up in the welds and in the holes, it's everywhere. And that way I know that when I paint this, or when I prime it or paint it, I'm not going to have any little surprises. Then this piece here, that's the last part of the process before paint. Now, this is a Bearco primer. I just like to use it. I seem to find it's a good thing. So once we get to this stage, I'll give this a wipe over with a little bit of thinners, like you would, a little bit of thinners on a lint-free cloth, and just to make sure there's nothing there that you're not aware of. And then I paint it with a primer, with this primer. Now, you can see I've got a little scratch mark somewhere there where I must have kicked it along the concrete. But once it's in this primer, and I have the whole front bolster housing that supports the axle in the primer, I can take my time then. I know that the weather's not going to get to it, and when it comes time to put the top coat on, I have a couple of options. You can paint straight over this, no problem at all. You don't have to roughen it up, you don't have to sand it or anything like that. You can get a little bit of steel wool and just run over, and that sort of roughens it up a little bit. Yeah, look, a little bit of steel wool's okay, but once you get this grey primer on, you're ready to put your top coat on. So with the axles here, this axle had actually had chains wrapped around it to pull the tractor out of a bog and in through here. So some of the tools I like to use are little 90-degree die grinders. Now, I love these things. They're my go-to tool. So when you get one of these little die grinders, look up a row lock, R-O-L-O-C fitting. And so the row lock fitting goes in, and you can get a, like this is a little flapper disc, a 3-inch flapper disc, and it just screws on and away you go. You run mad with it. Here's a little piece of, this is another 3-inch one, a little piece of 60 grit. So once again, you can pop your flapper disc off if you choose to. You can put that on, away you go, and that will clean the housing. Now, that's how I've got that nice edge here. That's using this flapper disc. And I choose to use a flapper disc in these instances is, one, it gets all this paint off without sandblasting, and look, it does it really quickly. Sometimes right in the welds there, you can see these were stick welded. You can actually, straight from the factory, you can actually see a bit of welding flux in some of the welds, right from the word go. So sometimes with the welds, I'll get the 4-inch angle grinder with the cup brush, the twist knot cup brush, run it back and forth on the welds, just the hard to get to places. That's if I choose not to sandblast it. Sandblasting will get all that out. I also have a glass bead blaster. Now, it's a small cabinet with glass beads, about 300 grit, I believe, and I use that for aluminium, like carbies, timing covers, things like that. I hit them with glass beads. I do then, if there's any gnarly marks that shouldn't be on them, from hammers, from chains or anything like that, back to my old roll locks. So this is another one. I run a couple of them, and this is Scotch Brite. So the brown Scotch Brite, it's for steel. It'll polish your steel, and you'll get a lovely finish on it. It'll polish your steel nicely. You can get a blue one. Blue one's for alloy, so and it's just not as aggressive. And there's a maroon one as well. So for these housings here that have had a bit of a caning and had, you can see there's a few marks under there. What I'll probably do is tip the axle over on this side. I've done it on this one. Tip it over, run an angle grinder across there, like a 4 or 5-inch angle grinder, and where the burrs are, where you can feel a burr that might cut your hand from the chain, I grind all that smooth, and I probably pulled this down 0.5 millimetre to 1 millimetre, and this side now is lovely and smooth. There's just a tiny little mark there where you can see where the chain went. But look, I'm not going to fill it. It's part of the history of the tractor, but I still like it nice as I can. So this housing here, yesterday, and I only thought to do this video this morning. Yesterday, I cleaned all this up best I could. Even the wire brush won't get those little bit of rust pits out. I radiused this edge where the chains had been and scoured it all up with the little 90-degree angle grinder, die grinder, 90-degree die grinder. They're sold on eBay as gasket strippers, and they're like $50, $40, $50. They're cheap. And the row lock fittings, they're $2 bob a dozen. And so, yeah, so I've smoothed all this out. Any little burrs around the holes, front and back, I use the flapper disc or the sandpaper, probably the flapper disc. And once I've used the flapper disc on that and it's nice and smooth, there's a little bit of, I can just feel a little bit of rust there still. But then I get out this rust converter, and at this stage here, I'm just about ready to put the rust converter on. It's smooth to the feel, but you can see that little bit of dark staining. A little bit of dark staining, sometimes moisture in the air can be there. You can heat it with an oxy or whatever, but look, there's no need. If you put this stuff on, it goes black, problem gone, neutralised. Any acids, any rust is neutralised. And I actually tested this stuff. I've got an old rusty 135 bonnet outside, and I thought, oh, I'll give this stuff a bit of a run. So I went and brushed some on the old bonnet outside there. And I've just left it in the weather, and that's 6 months ago. Out in the weather, everything rusts here and it's still going okay. But it's not really an ad for that. This is just what I do, what I like to use. So hopefully you can see the process. You clean this by sandblasting using either a Scotch-Brite pad, a flapper disc, or a piece of sandpaper. That's what I like to do anyway. Wire brush the welds if you need to. Once you have it smooth and you've dressed it down so there's no burrs, no, like there's a sharp mark there, got all that done and you're happy with that, you've brushed all the housings down here or sandblasted them, whatever you've chosen to do, then put a bit of rust converter on just to be sure. Then once you're happy with that, and once I've got rust converter over this whole axle, well, we'll be getting the grey spray out and we'll be using the spray gun. I use just a spray gun. For the little pieces, I have a small pot, and I just use a little small pot. And we undercoat it, we prime it. Then everything gets assembled pretty well. We've just finished filming, putting the rear engine seal and the timing cover and all on the engine. So the engine will probably come over into this bay now, and I'll use these tools to run over any paint, any scaly paint. You don't have to get it all off like this, because this was just being a haul out tractor in the sugarcane. It had really been flogged about. So you don't need to get everything shiny, but you need to get everything clean, grease and oil free, and make sure there's no little skims of paint that with a bit of thinners on them, they'll stick up. Now, if you just spray a bit of thinners over your thing before you're ready to paint it, that'll give you an indication too. But on my engine over there, I can see in a few places there's 3 and 4 layers of paint where it's been sorted out over the years. And I did clean some of the block while I had a bare block, but it still needs more yet. So anyway, hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into what I like to do. Look, it's like skinning a cat. There's 100 ways to do it, but that's my go-to. My tractors end up looking okay. The paint lasts well on them, and I don't have trouble with flaking paint, and I really hate seeing tractors that have been painted over dirt. So hopefully mine aren't like that. All right, thanks for stopping by. Hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight in how I do the main body and the castings.